Robin Williams, a man known for his comedy, various voices, and tender roles. Who could forget his energetic voice acting as the genie from Aladdin, his tender care as a therapist in Good Will Hunting, or when he was creepily obsessed with a family when he processed their photos and then became a stalker? Wait, what? Let's back up. Robin Williams was a man with range, and while he is most remembered for his roles in his comedies and some dramas, he also has had his fair share of dark roles in some pretty intense movies. So today I'm talking about the dark side of Robin Williams. Also, hi there, my name is Shayna, and I'm a puppet that talks about pop culture. If you like me, subscribe to my channel. Or I'll do something unthinkable, like eat a banana with the skin on. Okay, back to the topic at hand. In case you don't know, Robin Williams was an actor and a comedian who starred in many hit films. Just to name a few big ones, I'm talking Mrs. Doubtfire, Jumanji, The Birdcage, Dead Poets Society, and honestly, just so many more. And while he was often funny and loud or tender and sweet, he managed to not be typecast. So let's get into it with one of the first darker roles I saw him in. World's Greatest Dad. Bobcat Goldthwait's World's Greatest Dad came out in 2009, and what a story and a role this was for Robin Williams. Okay, major spoilers, I'm gonna give everything away for all these movies I mentioned, so you've been warned. So World's Greatest Dad is about Lance, a somewhat mild and milquetoast teacher, aspiring writer, and his dipshit 15-year-old son, Kyle. No, really, I haven't seen this movie in a minute, but trust me, his son is the worst, and you wonder how a sweet man could be related to this kid. Anyway, one night, Lance finds his son dead in his bedroom after a failed attempt at autoerotic asphyxiation. He's horrified and sad, and then when the horror wears off, he thinks about his son and how he kind of died in an embarrassing way. So to save his son Kyle's memory from the embarrassment, Lance crafts a suicide note. And remember, Lance is a poetry teacher and an aspiring writer, so he really gives the suicide letter a go. Anyway, word gets out, and so does the suicide note. And people are so moved by the suicide note. They're like, wow, who knew that kid Kyle, who was an awful little shit, was also so deep and troubled? And then, tempted by all of the praise, Lance is like, well, if you like the suicide note, he actually has a whole journal I can share. So then Lance writes a whole journal and publishes it under the guise that his son wrote it. And here's where the story gets really interesting, if that premise alone wasn't compelling enough. Kyle and his little fake journal are so successful that there is a cult following in the school and town. People are all pretending they were closer to Kyle than they really were. They're acting like Kyle wasn't a little shit even though he was. There's merch with Kyle's face on it being sold. He's become some kind of symbol for teen angst or something. I don't even know really. And the one person skeptical about all of this was Kyle's only actual friend, Andrew. Yeah, see, Kyle had one friend before all of this named Andrew, and Andrew was actually kind of nice, and when he would come over, him and Lance actually got along. Anyway, Andrew doesn't think the letter or the journal sound like Kyle, because, he actually knew the real Kyle, but Lance dismisses it. So finally, Lance is supposed to give a big speech at school about Kyle and the book, but he just can't take it anymore. The guilt of using his son's death, on top of all of the phonies pretending they liked Kyle when they didn't. He tells the truth about the whole situation, and then he's basically exiled from the community. And then he swims naked in the school pool, alone for some reason, but maybe it's symbolism for a rebirth or something. Anyway, the ending isn't so bad though, because despite him being shunned, it ends with Lance watching TV with his nice neighbor and Kyle's old friend Andrew. And he spends time with people who are nice that he gets along with instead of trying to impress people who kinda suck anyway. Now, I promise not all of my film summaries are this long, but I had to go into this one more because honestly, this story has so much going for it. It has a dark and unique premise. It touches upon themes of authenticity versus shallow popularity. It shows the ways that people get swept up in any kind of idea or movement that becomes trendy without having a personal connection to the source. It explores how it can sometimes be relieving to live in solitude authentically rather than be popular but surrounded by people you don't really like. It's described as a dark comedy, and I can see why. And isn't it so great that Robin Williams wasn't typecast to just play his goofy roles and got to star in a film like this? Sure, someone else could have played the role, I suppose, but I think it's precisely because Williams can tap into this tender, sweet side of him that it really works so well for this movie. The juxtaposition between his sweet, mild manners and his crude, crappy son and the world of phonies in this film really makes the story. Also, can we stop for a moment to acknowledge and appreciate who directed this? The man, the myth, the legend, Bobcat Goldthwait. Okay, first of all, great name, but also he's the guy with the funny voice from Police Academy. If you don't know who Bobcat Goldthwait is, please look him up and listen to his amazing voice and behold his great energy. I didn't realize he directed it when I first watched this movie, and knowing he directed it just makes it all the better. Okay, next up, let's talk about 1 Hour Photo. Mark Romanek's 1 Hour Photo came out in 2002, and this is another film where Robin Williams stepped outside of his typical comedy roles to play something more serious and sad. Really quick, and I promise this time it will be a shorter summary, 1 Hour Photo follows Cy, a man who works at a photo development lab in a little mall. Because back in the day when we didn't have digital or didn't do digital as much, you used to have your photos, which were like taken on film, developed. Anyway, Cy takes his job super seriously and processes the film with a perfectionist mindset. And this means that he sees all the photos he develops. Well, this family, the Yorkins, a pretty wife, husband, and child, have been having their photos developed by Cy for years. And Cy likes watching the son grow and seeing the family photos and the changes over the years. He's like attached to the family. But then one day, through developing photos, he learns that Will Yorkin has been cheating on his wife Nina Yorkin, and he's very upset about this. How could Will do this to the lovely Nina? Anyway, Cy becomes obsessed with the family and starts stalking them. He also gets fired from his job for breaking the rules, but not before framing his boss for being a creep. And Cy ends up confronting Will Yorkin and his affair partner in a hotel, and he threatens them while taking photos, and it's very traumatizing, and then he's taken into custody by the police. Yeah. How is this story darker than World's Greatest Dad? I mean, in World's Greatest Dad, you've got the autoerotic asphyxiation, and the lying, and the guilt, and everyone being a sad phony. But then, it's still hopeful because it seems like both a commentary about group behavior and being authentic. But 1 Hour Photo is just like, geez, Cy, maybe just get a hobby that involves meeting other people. It doesn't have to be like this. So yeah, I remember when I first heard about this movie, I was with a friend and a roommate, and we were trying to find a movie to watch, and my roommate was like, oh, did you guys ever see the movie 1 Hour Photo, where Robin Williams develops film, but becomes obsessed with a family through pictures? And my friend and I were like, excuse me, what? You had us at Robin Williams becomes obsessed and creepy. What I like about this film is, once again, Williams brings his tenderness to this role. As Cy, he is a shy loner, slightly socially awkward kind of guy. I think that's what works. You read a role like this, and it's probably tempting to amp up the creepy, but sometimes by trying to act creepy, it's too much and comes off disingenuous. By playing the role gently, his actions speak for themselves, and once again, we have the juxtaposition that adds meaning. What do you mean this sweet little anal retentive man is making a family uncomfortable? You know? And also shout out to Mark Romanek, who also wrote the film, because Jacob Yorkin, the little boy who is like the son, he's like the one who really sees Cy for who he is. There's a part early on, before we realize how disturbed Cy is, where Jacob and his mom interact with Cy, and then later, Jacob asks his mom why Cy is so sad. This little boy sees a man who's a bit awkward, and instead of judging him, he just reads the underlying emotion, which is that Cy is sad and lonely. And then later, Cy basically tries to kidnap Jacob or offer him a toy or something. I forget because it's been a long time since I've seen it, but Jacob knows something is off and acts smart to get out of the situation. I think the writer really captured something about the ways that kids can be perceptive at times. Okay, now there's a handful of other films I could mention, like Insomnia, which I feel like I've seen clips of on TV many times, but I don't really remember it, or his role in Death to Smoochie, which I saw for the first time recently and really enjoyed. But I think there's one film I want to mention because even though it's a comedy, I think it's dark. Because it friggin' traumatized me! I'm talking about Patch Adams. Tom Shadyak's Patch Adams came out in 1998, and Shayna watched it at a young age with her mother because it was advertised as a comedy, and my mother was like, had no reason to think it would be depressing. What, Robin Williams curing people with laughter? That sounds nice, right? Wrong. Patch Adams was too depressing for my young mind to handle, so I've never watched it again. But still, I will try to talk about it. Just know that my summary is going to be from my vague memories, plus summaries I found online. Okay, so Patch Adams is about this guy Patch who struggles with mental health and comes to the conclusion while in a psych ward that laughter is really the best medicine. So he leaves the psych ward and goes to medical school to become a doctor. But he's all like, why are you guys so cold and clinical and medical all the time? Why don't you try making the patients feel good through humor? And eventually he befriends/falls in love with a classmate, Karen, and they open their own clinic for people who don't have insurance, and they make them all happy. Isn't that nice? What's so traumatizing about that, Shayna, you ask? Well, his friend Karen gets murder-suicided by one of the patients. Like the patient shows up at her home or something like that, and he's acting weird, and then he pulls out a gun and shoots her and then himself. And the last thing I remember about this movie is Patch is obviously sad, and he goes outside and he sees a butterfly and it cheers him up because one time Karen told him she wished she could be a butterfly. So he saw this butterfly as a sign. Maybe it was Karen or maybe it was hope, but he smiles. And I swear to you, up until writing the script for this, I thought that was where the movie ended. Patch sees a butterfly, smiles, then fade to black, roll credits. But I was looking up the movie and read a summary and discovered there's a little more to the movie. He almost gets kicked out of school or loses his license or whatever, but then the board allows him to graduate, and then he graduates and he flashes everyone on stage. Yeah, I really don't remember that because I was too busy being a child that watched Karen get murdered and a guy commit suicide. It shook me to my stuffing and threads. Maybe I should give it another chance now that I'm a little older, but yeah, I don't know how this movie is considered the comedy when I find it far darker and traumatizing than the first two films I covered. But once again, the through line through all of this is Robin Williams bringing his tenderness to his roles. He can go from being the tender therapist that helps you work out your problems to the tender dad dealing with a crappy kid in a sad situation, to the tender film technician who through loneliness becomes a little too attached to a family, to a tender doctor finding a way to heal people in unorthodox ways. And somehow I believe these are all different people, and somehow it's the doctor's story that breaks my heart the most. Robin Williams was a treasure. So what did you think? Have you seen any of these films? Did you have a similar reaction to Patch Adams, and should I give it another chance? What are some of your favorite Robin Williams movies? Let me know in the comments, but only nice comments, okay? Nice comments for Shayna, and while you're at it, subscribe to my channel. Now, if you like this, YouTube thinks you might like this other video I did over here, so click on it and give it a chance, huh? Okay, thank you, bye!